Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today I want to talk about this situation out of Columbus, Mississippi, where an on-duty, in-uniform police officer decided to walk into a Dick's Sporting Goods and steal $140 worth of sneakers, one pair of shoes from this place, and she actually ended up getting detained by a loss prevention specialist, a store security guard, until a bunch of people in high-ranking positions in the Columbus, Mississippi department had to come down and embarrassingly arrest this officer, who is now fired. Now, we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about police officer shoplifting because I found quite a few instances of this crime occurring. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
A police officer has been arrested accused of stealing a pair of shoes while on duty. Robin Connor was arrested after officers were called to Dick's Sporting Goods about 12:30 this afternoon. She's charged with misdemeanor shoplifting. Police Chief Joseph Daughtry says Connor was wearing her uniform and was on duty when she was taken into custody.
Yeah, so this is obviously pretty bad. You have a uniformed police officer going into a store, like I said in the open, stealing a pair of sneakers valued at $140. And to make matters worse, this Columbus police officer actually ends up making per year about $50,000 to $59,000. So she's actually not doing that bad off, especially for Mississippi, but she decided to do this with her patrol car, and of course it is a rather embarrassing situation for the entire department and for police officers as a whole. Now, I have actually discovered quite a few instances of police officers shoplifting, but in my opinion, none are bolder than this woman right here. And by the way, even though she is a police officer in terms of job title, she definitely takes a mugshot like a criminal. She looks absolutely horrible there. Let's be honest, it looks like she hasn't slept in about 15 days.
Connor was on her second stint with the department. She returned about 2 years ago. Now she's on administrative leave, and this investigation is continuing.
Now, even though the local news says that she was on administrative leave, what you guys need to understand out there in the audience is that police officers are in a police union. So in a situation like this, the first step is to put them on administrative leave, even if they're caught on video stealing shoes from a department store like Dick's Sporting Goods. However, the update to this story is that there was a special council called, a meeting by the city council, and they ended up voting unanimously to fire Robin Connor, so she is not an officer anymore. But yeah, this is highly embarrassing and ridiculous and absurd, and it's about to get even more absurd as we go through the story. But let's hear from the police chief, because he pretty much explains how everybody's feeling about this whole situation.
We have a job to do. We're held to a higher standard, and the community is just starting to trust us. And to take this gut punch really hurts. That's why we fulfilled our obligation, not only to the store, but to this community.
So yeah, this is obviously embarrassing, and it's more embarrassing than you can possibly imagine when you go into the details of this particular case. So let's shift from the local news to this New York Post article, because I find it quite fascinating, all of the different steps that they had to do, because when you get a call into 911 that you have detained somebody for shoplifting and they're an in-uniform police officer, protocols kind of spin out of control really quickly. Again, a store employee ended up catching Connor trying to steal the shoes, detained her, which is kind of impressive that he was able to detain her, before calling 911. They actually said over the 911 call, cannot wait for the audio of this, that we actually have an on-duty, in-uniform police officer detained under suspicion of shoplifting, and the patrol car is out in front. Can you send somebody? Now, because of this unique situation, they decided to call in the captain of her precinct. They called in the chief and the assistant chief of police coming in order to investigate this particular situation. Now, when they came in, apparently, they ended up looking at the surveillance video. There was enough compelling evidence to have probable cause for an arrest, and Connor was arrested at the scene. But to make matters even more humiliating, because they needed to get her patrol car out of there, they decided to load her into the back of her own patrol car as they took her to jail. Now, just imagine being in this much of an embarrassing situation. Imagine imagine being this officer for a second. You pull up to a store, Dick's Sporting Goods, in your own patrol car, in uniform. You decide to walk through the aisles and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna steal a pair of sneakers. And then by the end of this whole ordeal, you are on your way to jail, not making an arrest, but in the back of your own patrol car, where many a perpetrator have been throughout your time as an officer. Kind of fitting. It's kind of like a bookend to this whole situation, which makes me laugh. And I don't know if they did this intentionally or it was due to the practicalities of the situation. But if I'm being perfectly honest, it is quite beautiful the way that this was resolved. The fact that she started out as a law-abiding officer and ended up as a criminal. Now, of course, there are other instances of shoplifting that I want to get into. However, I do want to point out for those of you out there in the audience that because this is a black female officer who, by the way, was arrested for stealing sneakers, that there are some people out there, aka Rayshad Ritchie, and by the way, thank you to Nate the lawyer for pointing this out to me so I can go dig up the clip, who decided to label this situation a potential instance of evil white racism.
Quote, an employee observed them and detained the officer and called 911. We're putting her in jail. It's embarrassing for the department, but we're going to treat her like we would anybody else. Put up a picture again. You know, if she would have just shot an unarmed black person, she would still at least be suspended with pay. So sad.
Rayshad Ritchie is legitimately one of the worst people on the internet.com. You guys saw the police chief. He is a black person. This is a pretty much open and shut case of shoplifting, but Rayshad cannot help himself and say that you know who the real victim is in this situation? Not Dick's Sporting Goods, the people who actually had stuff stolen from them, not the people who had to make the difficult decision on attempting to detain a police officer, not the department that is embarrassed by one of their own, not the community who has been supporting a police officer that probably did this multiple different times, but unarmed, innocent, angel black people that are fictitious in this particular scenario and the victim of evil white racism, even though, again, this situation happens to involve all black people. You saw the police chief, you saw the officer. I even think that maybe even the people working at Dick's Sporting Goods were likely to be black, but for some reason, we gotta say that really what you need to be thinking about is innocent, angel, unarmed criminals that were being killed by these racist police officers, all of whom are actually black police officers.
You know, if she would have just shot an unarmed black person, she would still at least be suspended with pay.
Everybody in this situation is black, but gosh, aren't white people racist? Now, let's go on a little bit further in this before I jump to some other stories so you guys can see how these situations tend to normally break down, because this one is unique in one way. Now, like I said, Connor, they ended up having a special session in order to fire her, but in that moment, she was arrested. She was charged with misdemeanor shoplifting. The reason why she was charged with misdemeanor shoplifting is because she stole under $1,000 worth of merchandise. She had a bail set for her, but honestly, the details of that are not all that interesting. What I do find interesting, though, is it appears that everybody is on the same page in this situation, in that they want to throw the book at her in order to make an example of her, because there is a belief that police officers should be held to a higher standard. And I actually think this is 100% true, because back in the past in the United States of America, one of the biggest types of corruption that we had with police officers happened to be economic corruption, taking bribes and all that. And this is largely why police officers are much better paid and have much better benefits now than they did in the past. The idea is, if you have officers that are not even making the middle class, and yet they're confronted with all these criminal organizations with tons of money, then they're going to take advantage. They might steal from people they arrest and abuse their law enforcement capacity in order to economically enrich themselves. So we had a major cultural change in our country, in departments across the nation, where we would hold officers accountable for said economic corruption. This is something that I'm happy to say is still embedded in our law enforcement, so they're going to go after her, and they definitely should. However, this case is, again, very bold in the fact that she did this while she was on duty, while she was on uniform, and while she had her patrol car. She was totally acting in her capacity as a police officer. She believed that she would not get caught. And again, credit to the store employee for detaining her. But in my opinion, it is clear and obvious that this is not the first time that she did this. And by the way, the reason I say that's atypical is because the other instances of officers stealing stuff, shoplifting, were off-duty officers who were only later discovered to be officers, like this case out of Albuquerque.
Two Albuquerque police officers recognizing one of their own on surveillance footage captured inside a Target store.
So what do you have? Tell us what's right. So I caught her tick switching through, like, just reviewing and everything.
Ticket switching, when someone takes the price tag off a cheaper item and puts it on the more expensive one they're buying. The officers are speaking with loss prevention specialist Ty Hunt, who says he frequently reviews surveillance footage to keep an eye on possible shoplifting at the Target on Coors Boulevard in northwest Albuquerque.
Basically, she just ticket switches, like, it's personal care stuff.
Hunt's typically tipped off, he tells the two, when someone buys plastic cups, which cost just 50 cents. The first time Vanessa Santillanes did that, Hunt shows them April 17th. An incident report reveals she saved herself $67.90.
Now, this Albuquerque officer has also been arrested. She's also been charged. In fact, they might have proof of her stealing a lot more in terms of valuables, but the way that she was doing it was at least attempting to be stealth. It was at least attempting to act in the same way that other people tend to act when they do retail theft. She ended up swapping out barcodes, swapping out price tags, going to the self-checkout, and the way that she got away with stealing was the fact that she was paying for certain items. However, she wasn't paying the actual price in that situation. Also, I know a lot of people are going to point out that this is a female officer, but I did find one instance of a male officer doing this, and this is both more similar to Connor's case, but significantly less similar due to the fact that he stole something that clearly and obviously was nowhere near the level of value and was much more concealable.
It was last Friday, just after 10 in the morning, a 25th District Police officer in full uniform is seen walking into the 7-Eleven store in the 1100 block of East Luzerne. Surveillance video obtained by Action News shows him walking up to a cooler. He looks through the items and then grabs what a police report says is a 12-ounce Celsius Kiwi Guava energy drink that sells for $2.49 plus tax. But the video shows that instead of going to the cashier to pay for it, he simply walked out the door. That shocked the clerk, who alerted the owner's wife, who was also at the counter. She did not want her face shown.
Hey, this guy officer, he didn't pay for his stuff. I'm like, what? I said, maybe he...
Now, I want to point out a few things with this particular instance, and they're going to add a little bit of nuance to the situation, but also I'm going to condemn the local news for blurring out this officer's face. If he is accused of retail theft, if he is a suspect in that crime, why are you hiding his identity? And now, by the way, this happens to be in Philadelphia, but the reason I want to say there's a bit more nuance in this particular situation is because I've actually seen similar things in my life at 7-Eleven in particular, and this is officers, but with permission, essentially getting free items from those stores. Now, to be clear, this is actually considered economic corruption. If you're a police officer out there and you're being offered free coffee, free drinks, whatever, you should never accept it because that can set you up for a situation where this person is expecting favors from you, and it can lead to charges of economic corruption down the line that end up having a large negative impact on your professional career. Trust me, pay for your own coffee when you're on duty. When people try to insist on giving you stuff for free, you don't want to do that. I actually studied under the DI for discipline for the NYPD when I was in college all those years ago, and he explained to me how many cases that he had where he would bust people specifically at 7-Eleven for getting free things like coffee and or donuts and or whatever. And the reason he was able to get to that position was because he, as an officer, was smart enough throughout the course of his career when he was coming up to never accept those free perks, even though they are minimal. And by the way, there's all kinds of tricks to do that. So I give that nuance for you guys out there in the audience because this is something that I have seen, but it has permission, even though it's a different problem that I think needs to be addressed typically. However, in this particular situation, the clerk was obviously in shock of the fact that this guy just stole this drink. The owner appears to be in shock shock of this person stealing this drink. That's why they went to the local news. That's why they're presenting this as a problem. So obviously the Philadelphia Police Department does not have an arrangement or an agreement or an understanding with that particular 7-Eleven that the police officers that I would see at the 7-Eleven that was near me tended to have, albeit that arrangement is not legitimate. Now, of course, obviously, one of the reasons why this is more brazen is because you can see the video, but I just want you to imagine not a 7-Eleven, not a situation that many people have seen throughout their lives, but a Dick's Sporting Goods and somebody in uniform trying to tuck a sneaker box under their shirt or whatever way that this woman ended up trying to do that. So it is both more brazen in that you can see it, but if we saw the surveillance video related to that other case, it might look less brazen than an officer trying to steal a shoebox.
So he kept walking.
She and her husband went outside the store to let him know he had to pay for the item. They tried to flag him down, but
he ignored us too, and he just took off.
The owner says he was even more shocked because he is a big supporter of the Philadelphia police and immediately contacted one of a number of police officers he befriended over the years to show him the video.
He was shocked. He approached his officer, his supervisor right away, and they want me to make the official report for that.
Now, in this particular scenario, that officer was out of there incredibly quickly. He took off, ran away. And again, this just goes to show you the level of entitlement that some people have in uniform. And for me, all of these cases have one thing in common, including cases that I did not show because I'm not trying to spend all this time going to every instance of documented shoplifting of police officers. And that is the response needs to be the same each and every time. Hold the officer accountable. Hold them to that higher standard. And by the way, we should have consequences for regular people doing shoplifting, but we definitely need that for police officers because this is shameful behavior. Again, just imagine if that officer decided rather than surrendering to the person at Dick's Sporting Goods and being detained and waiting for those people to be there, that she was going to fight back. And then your regular ordinary store employee that's going to get into a potentially deadly encounter with a police officer who is trying to steal sneakers. Imagine what happens if you're an officer responding to that scene. You see one of your female officers in uniform fighting with some random person who works at Dick's Sporting Goods. You're going to assume, you're going to think that the employee at the store is in the wrong, and that could lead to serious negative consequences for that person who is attacking an officer. You put people in increased danger when you act in this way in uniform. It's embarrassing to the uniform, and there definitely needs to be some consequences. So I'm glad that they fired her. I know the union protected her and she was originally put on administrative leave, but that is a part of the process. But the fact that the city council got together and said no way and dismissed this person for this theft is definitely something that we should all be proud of. It's definitely the right thing to do in that situation because you have to respond and make it clear to every officer, no matter the rank, that this cannot be tolerated. On top of that, very embarrassing for this woman to be arrested not only by her own captain, not only by the police chief, but also the assistant police chief because they took this situation that seriously. I like that energy. I want people to do this. You need to show people that no one is above the law, and this is how you do it. But hey, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a police officer being arrested for stealing sneakers. Till next time.